sitting, try to have a comfortable posture. So I think everybody is sitting on the floor, seems like. But anyway, in any case, you check with your legs. Yeah? If you want to sit cross-legged, that the legs form a stable posture. Yeah, so that there's stability as a foundation for the rest of the body. So this might mean, if you can do that, that the knees are touching the ground, and you try to have a cushion under your backside to lift this a little bit up, so that the weight goes onto the knees. If you are able to do that, that would be a very stable position. So we try to take such a stable position, but at the same time we check if we are comfortable in that there's no tension or even pain in the legs right now. And then we check that part, how our legs are, that we have a stable basis for sitting. Let's check that. So if you're sitting on a chair, then still you can work with your legs to have a stable position and a comfortable position. Obviously, if something is hurting or is tense, then we move it and relax it. And then the most important thing is that the back is straight. If the back is straight, then the energies can freely flow up and down the central channel. That's positive and conducive for working with our mind. And so we can imagine that the spine is like a straight arrow, or like a pile of coins, a stack of coins, very straight. Then next we check our shoulders, that there's no tension in the shoulders, which is often the case. Many of our inner tensions are expressing themselves in tension in the shoulder. So let's check that. If you like, you can roll the shoulders or lift them up and let them fall to make sure that they are relaxed. And then you put the right hand and the left hand in your lap, and so that the thumbs are touching. And the head is slightly tucked in. So we're not looking straight ahead of us, but to the floor, along the nose, actually, like a meter in front of us. So that means that your fist is still fitting between your chin and on your throat. So in this way to tuck it in. If you tuck it in too much, we will get sleepy. If we keep the head too much up, we get excited and we will not be able to concentrate. And then the eyes are half open, and as I said, they are looking along the back of the nose. So again, they're not completely open because that would make us too excited, and they're not closed because this is a condition for falling asleep or get sleepy. So if you want to meditate with closed eyes, then you can remember, if you find yourself in a sleepy state, you can, for example, use that you open the eyes half to get more light into your eyes, and therefore deal with the sleepiness, wake up a little bit. And then we make sure that there's no tensions anywhere else in the face. All the facial muscles relaxed, no tension around the eyes or the jaw. And especially that we don't have the lips pressed together, but just naturally resting on each other. Also the teeth, not clenched together, but relaxed, naturally resting on each other. And the tip of the tongue we put behind the upper row of the teeth at the palate, so that we don't produce so much saliva and have to swallow so much. In this way we relax and prepare the body to be a conducive partner in this meditation. And then when we have prepared the body in this way, then we can become aware that we are in a very special place. This is kind of a Dharma center or a place where people meet for Dharma activities, for meditation, where all kind of teachers already have come and have taught and so forth. It's a very special group and a very special place for the group activity. There's not many places like this in Cluj or anywhere in Romania. Very rare and precious situation. And so we allow ourselves to be just in this conducive, peaceful place with this special group of people, and decide that we're going to keep the mind within this room, decorated with different Dharma symbols and so forth. It's the best place to be right now. We don't have to go somewhere else with our mind. We can keep it right here. And then in order to concentrate the mind even further, we can place the mind on the breath. So that means we are observing how the mind is flowing in and out, either at the nostrils, or we can observe how the belly is raising and going back. And this way, observing the breath, how it goes in and out. If this is helpful for you, you can count it up to 10, one time in and out, 1, again 2, and so forth. And if you reach 10, we start again with 1, if this is helpful. Otherwise, you can just observe the breath without counting. And that's all what we're going to do. We don't do anything else. We don't have to think about the past. We don't have to plan the future. We don't have to go anywhere else in the present. We just allow ourselves these few minutes of doing just that. Just placing the mind on the breath. If the mind wanders off, we bring it back without drama. Just naturally bring it back to the breath. If the mind gets sleepy and heavy, we wake it up by either meditating on a bright light or remembering, for example, to open the eyes or to keep the eyes half open and so forth. So let's do this for some minutes to focus on the breath. If the mind wanders off, we gently bring it back to the breath. If the mind gets heavy, we focus on a very bright light like the sun or some lamp or something to wake us up, and then we put our mind again on the breath. And then having prepared body and mind, we can generate a motivation into this peaceful space that we have created in the mind. We want to generate a motivation to have clear why we are engaging into this session, into this Dharma activity. And so again, we can ask ourselves first, where are we right now? What's our motivation right now? Why did we come here tonight? Nobody forced us to come here. We're completely here because we chose to come here. What made us come here tonight? What's our motivation right now? And then already as a first practice, we can work with generating a motivation. We work with our motivation, we expand it. So we can think, for example, I want to participate in this session with all my intelligence, all my emotion, all my concentration, all my analysis and investigation, in order to understand more about my mind, which is the central phenomenon in my life. I want to understand more how the mind develops, what kind of states of mind there are. I want to understand more about my life and my death and my rebirth. I want to understand more about my happiness and my suffering, and what kind of help and support I can get from Buddhism and from the Buddha with regard to all of these topics. So in order to get more skilled with my mind and my life, I want to participate with all what I have in this session. And then I don't want to learn only about my mind for my own ends, but I want to learn about my mind in order to understand all the beings around me, everybody that I meet at work, in the family, in public transport, in the shops and so forth, everybody I see in television, every animal, human being, in order to understand the other beings, their feelings, their mind, in order to communicate with them better and so forth, in order to be beneficial for them. I want to learn more about my mind and its potential and develop that so I can be of greater benefit to others. Because there's a part of me that wants to take care of others. Because of that, I want to participate in this session. And then with these projects of mine to understand myself more and my potentials and what is happiness and what is suffering inside of my experiences. And also with my project to be more beneficial to others in my communication, in my actions with others, my understanding of others and so forth. I will call on the support of the Buddha and his teaching and the community of those who are practicing his teachings as a support for this practice, for this project, to develop myself further and further, to liberate myself from problems, miscommunication, and suffering, and to actualize all my potentials for peace, love, compassion, clarity, insight, and joy. This is why I came for these teachings. This is why I want to know about Buddhism. I want to get some help, some support from that. So in a way, it's going to be a refuge for me as a person that wants to be happy and doesn't want to suffer and wants to help others. Thank you very much. So I think this kind of thought that we have just been meditating on, how refuge actually means to go for support with regard to your own projects, let's say the project of being happy and not suffering, for example, or the project of being able to have more harmonious relationships with others, or to be able to actually understand others in their needs and so forth and be beneficial to them, helpful to them, maybe protect them from harm and so forth. Yeah, so this kind of altruistic motivations as well. So this kind of projects, spiritual aims, yeah, we're trying to get some support from spiritual beings, like completely enlightened beings like the Buddha, or like those who are the so-called Sangha, which is actually referring to practitioners which are very advanced on the path to Buddhahood. And especially we want to get support from the actual teaching. Yeah, the teaching itself is that what is supporting us actually. The Buddha is the teacher of this of the refuge. The Dharma is the actual refuge, and the Sangha, the community of practitioners, is those that are supporting us in putting this refuge or this support into practice, and therefore actually changing things in our life and changing things in our emotions, thoughts, actions, and so forth. Yeah, so therefore, refuge is actually very much connected to oneself already having what I call a spiritual project or a spiritual aim. Now you have a spiritual aim, a spiritual agenda, if you like, and you want support with that. You already have a certain spiritual idea, and you need support with that. So this is actually coming in 3 stages and 3 levels in the Lamrim, in the graduated path to enlightenment, one of the core teachings of Tibetan Buddhism. The first one is that you try to prepare for death, and you have an understanding that death is not the end, because consciousness and experience and feeling is something very different from the matter of the body. So this consciousness will continue in its own continuity, even if the body stops breathing or dies or is like burned to ashes or is buried in the ground and so forth. So it will continue anyway. So there is these future experiences, these future lives, and they will be flavored by the actions that we did in this life. So in order to be able to influence this kind of process of rebirth so that the next birth turns out well, that can be a spiritual goal. It's spiritual insofar as that it is working with the mind, with the spirit. It is definitely a goal that is going beyond this life, beyond ordinary things like just enjoyments or making money or traveling the world. It's going really cosmic. It's going beyond this life into many, many future lives, understanding that there were many past lives. So with that kind of project that is really far-reaching, you want support. You need support, and you don't get the support from the people that you're normal together with. You need like a system or practitioners or other people to share with or to get instructions about how to practice and so forth. Yeah, so that's where you take refuge. Actually, it's going even a step further. It is saying like you understand that these rebirths also can take on quite some very fearful states. Yeah, so there's space of rebirth that are not just the continuity of the mind, but the continuity of the mind into a form of the mind that is full of fear or even full of pain. So you want to avoid this kind of rebirths, and instead you want to get again a human rebirth, especially, or at least one of the different higher rebirths. Are you familiar with the 6 realms of rebirth? Does this mean something to the people?
Yes, for some of them.
Yeah.
Yeah, for most of them, I would say.
So, Marius, this is the last session on Refuge, or do we have another one?
No, it's the last one.
Okay. So then I just keep it to that. Our rebirths can take rather bizarre forms and rather painful or fearful forms, and they can take more peaceful or safe forms or conducive or joyful forms. Yeah. So on the first level, you would aim for a so-called good rebirth as opposed to a negative rebirth. Something very easy to think about is how animals have a lot of similarity with us. How animals are even building states in the case of bees and ants. How animals are having architecture and are building homes and houses, like in the case of certain birds and so forth. What they're building, that's really amazing. All kind of things. Yeah? There's a lot to be said about that. So they're very, very similar to us, actually. You don't want to be born as an animal. Animals are characterized in the text as being constantly afraid of being killed. And of course, we can think about our pets that we have at home. So that's a very specific situation of an animal. But normally in nature, beings are constantly checking if there is a deadly threat right around the corner. Because if this deadly threat manifests, they will be eaten alive. And I guess this is how most animals die. They're eaten alive. The moment you're not quick enough or can fly off quick enough or run enough, you will be eaten alive. You don't want to be born there. You don't want to live a life where you're constantly afraid of being eaten alive. So from that point of view, whatever is going on in the human world, wars and other things, which are horrible enough, it's still a good rebirth. So that's the kind of the very basic approach to this whole idea of that there's lower rebirth and higher rebirth. So on this first level, you want to be such a how do you say master over death and the death process that you are managing all the factors that are in the process, not only of dying but of taking rebirth, such that you can ensure that there's a good rebirth. So that's quite a project, yeah, that you will be able to engineer your next life, that you will be able to shape your next life, and you can go into quite some detail how this life can look like and so forth. So that's the first level. Yeah. So here already for that you want to have the support of teachers and I say systems of practice and so forth. Dharma, in other words, and practitioners of that kind of system that are helping you with this kind of extraordinary project of actually manipulating the death process. So that's the first level. But actually, the Dalai Lama says a good rebirth is not in itself a goal in Buddhism. It is just a stepping stone for the actual goals, because the high goals, the actual spiritual goals of Buddhism are nirvana or liberation from samsara, and complete enlightenment as a Buddha. And these are goals that are so far-reaching that it will take many lives, several lives, many lives actually, and those kind of lives would be lives of practice that are all kind of contributing to this final goal of liberation or of complete enlightenment. And in order to attain that, you need this many lives, but it's not just any lives, but they have to be lives that in which you have enough leisure, enough freedom, enough peace to actually practice. And they have to be lives where the Dharma is present and so forth, yeah, so-called precious human rebirth. So that's a good rebirth, and rebirth in the upper realms as a precious human rebirth. And that's what you're aiming for in Buddhism, to get this lives where you can practice again and again towards liberation and a complete omniscience. Yeah, so therefore the actual idea behind being able to manipulate the death process is so that you can have these lives again and again to practice for the actual goals. So then there's a second level, therefore, of refuge, where you are actually aiming as your spiritual goal at liberation. You want to break free from death altogether. It's not just that you understand you're going to die and you accept death and you know that you're impermanent and you prepare for your next life. And maybe you can even do practices such that you can prepare for many future lives. But you say, even if I get a good rebirth in the future, then I'm going to die in that rebirth. And I'm going to have again to manipulate the death process and engineer another life and so forth. And even if I then get again another good rebirth, I'm going to die again and so forth. And within that, these lives, even if it's a good life in the upper realms, there can be many sufferings. I mean, we see, I just said that a human rebirth is called a good rebirth, a higher rebirth, and yet there's so many sufferings in the human realm, even strong sufferings of the type of sickness or of war or of imprisonment or abuse and so forth. And then there's many mental sufferings like depression or being aggressive in your mind all the time, angry and stuff like that. So this second level is simply dissatisfied with this whole system of rebirth that is whatever kind of rebirth you are taking, although the suffering has different degrees in the different realms of rebirth, they all have suffering. So you want to go beyond that. This is so because you don't want to suffer and you want to be happy as at the very core of your heart. So that's what liberation is talking about. You get liberated from samsara, you get liberated from all the suffering states of samsara, you get liberated of the rebirth process and so forth, and you attain to a completely different type of life, a life that is continuously in peace and continuously in bliss. So there's many different forms of that, but all of them are outside of nirvana and they're outside of samsara. They're all liberated from samsara. So this is the second level of practice in the Lamrim, and that's obviously a huge project, unbelievable vision of what you can do with your mind and with your energies, inside energies, and so how you can transform all of that into a completely different type of life, of existence. There you will need support for this kind of project from a being that itself is already liberated, is outside of samsara. Nobody inside of samsara will be able to help you with this project. So it's the beings that are outside of samsara can kind of throw you a rope, that on this rope you can get out of this pit, which is samsara. In other words, you would rely on the Buddha here as the one who's teaching the Dharma as a path out of samsara into nirvana. And then on the highest level, there is this emphasis on the happiness of others. So while also on the level where you're aiming for your own samsara, there's also practices of love and compassion and so forth, and equanimity and so forth, sympathy for others. But at the same time, the highest level, which is included in the so-called Mahayana or Great Vehicle, is this attitude that you are taking on the responsibility for everybody around you to get liberated out of samsara, to get liberated out of death, to get liberated out of aging, to get liberated out of anger, out of desire, out of jealousy, out of depression, and so forth. Get liberated out of the danger to be reborn in an animal realm or below, and so forth. Yeah? You take on the responsibility to liberate all beings. And so this is talking about the people around you, it's talking about all human beings, it's talking about all animals, including all insects. Very, very vast vision, unbelievably vast. So that's would come down to what is called great compassion. So somebody would understand all the suffering that is included in samsara. He would understand how oneself has mind, doesn't want suffering, wants happiness. And the same thing is true for everybody around us. Everything that is alive has exactly this wish to be free of suffering and not to suffer, and to have happiness and be free of suffering. So taking this similarity between yourself and others, and having previously generated a mind that you want to be free of samsara, you then turn this around and instead take on the responsibility to free everybody else from samsara, because they're exactly the same to you with regard to wanting to be free of suffering and wanting to have happiness and peace. So there you understand that in order to bring this about with this kind of limitless number of beings, to liberate all of them, to benefit all of them, you would have to have the skills of a Buddha. So you would have to be the refuge of Buddha Dharma Sangha yourself. So that's an unbelievable vast goal in spirituality, and you will definitely need support for that. You will have to have a master that helps you with that. You will have an enlightened being that itself has gone to this state, like the Buddha himself, then he's actually teaching, and then definitely also a community that practices together with you. So here there is 3 different levels of going for refuge. You can go for refuge in order to have support with not going to the lower realms, but getting a good rebirth. You can go for refuge with regard to wanting to become completely free from this kind of way of existing where you constantly die and then take a rebirth, have all kind of situations and sufferings and misunderstandings, and then you die again and you take another rebirth and so forth. To getting free from that, you take refuge in Buddha Dharma Sangha. You take refuge in the Dharma, the path that is prescribed to you by the Buddha in order to get out of this. And then you can do this even for all sentient beings, taking responsibility for all that is alive to bring it into a state of peace and lasting happiness. So for this, you take refuge in the Buddha as the teacher of a path to be able to do that, and then in this actual path, and then the Sangha that helps you to practice that. Yeah, so you have these different levels. So that's what I mean, like that going for refuge is actually talking about getting a support, getting some help with regard to projects that you have, or with regard to spiritual aims that you have generated. So therefore, going for refuge is not happening out of the blue. Like you feel like, oh, I like the Buddha, maybe I should go for refuge. But it is based on having quite an understanding of the Buddhist world, of what the Buddha is describing about this life, about mind, about karma, about imprints, how mind is different from matter, from the body, how there's future lives, how there were past lives, and so forth, what samsara is about, what is Buddha nature, how all other beings are exactly like you. So there's a lot of context out of which you generate a certain wish for a certain kind of goal, spiritual goal. And with regard to that, you want to have support. You go for refuge. Yeah. So then you go for refuge on the one hand because you want to attain this kind of goal. Yeah, they actually talk about you go for refuge out of fear. You are afraid of being reborn in the lower realms. Therefore, you go for help, for support. You are afraid of having to stay in samsara, in this constantly recurring death and rebirth and redeath and rebirth and redeath. Therefore, you go for help. Or you're afraid to not become enlightened and not be able to help all sentient beings in the highest way, and therefore you go for refuge. So that's the one side. You have to have this kind of project, this interest, or even literally it says the fear on the one hand. The second cause is that you understand the qualities of the three refuge jewels, that what you take refuge in, the refuge objects, the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. So here, obviously, you would gain more and more conviction with regard to the Buddha and the Dharma and the Sangha by way of studying more of the teachings of the Buddha. So that would be a reasonable step. You study, you try to learn as much as possible about Buddhism, about Mahayana Buddhism and so forth. And you're not just kind of memorizing words, but you're actually investigating, you're engaging, you're discussing, you say like, that doesn't make sense to me. Why would the Buddha say that? Yeah, so you really go there. Some things might make sense immediately, other things might be kind of first time that we ever heard such a concept, so it might not make sense immediately, so it will take some time. But the more you investigate these teachings and the more they make sense to you, and the more you also apply them and you see that they are beneficial to you, or maybe also you see other practitioners and you see how these teachings were beneficial to them, and you see the benefit of the Dharma, then the more that understanding of the Dharma and of the benefit of the Dharma grows in you, the more respect you will have for that one who teaches the Dharma. You will also understand, by understanding more of the Dharma, you will understand more about what Buddhahood actually is, what kind of really amazing, elevated state the Buddha is in. Yeah, what qualities the Buddha has and how he gained that. You will also understand that the Buddha has not been in this state always, but he practiced this Dharma himself. Yeah, so the Dharma is not a revelation from a God that is of a completely different type from us, but the Buddha was exactly like us. He knows exactly how we feel. He knows exactly all the problems that we're encountering every day. He understands completely what we're yearning for, what we're longing for. And he also understands maybe our misconceptions about ourselves and about life and why our lives have little chance to actually work out as long as we follow this kind of projections and misconceptions. Because he was there, he had himself these misconceptions. His life didn't work out. He had all kind of miscommunication, sufferings, and so forth. He was depressed in past lives. And then for many lives, he actually took refuge. And he took a path and he took a support and he was actually practicing and transforming. And by now, he has gained this very high, elevated, pure state of complete enlightenment, which is a state that you attain on the basis of compassion, love, concern, loving kindness. So that being the basis for attaining this state, the Buddha is now in the highest state of compassion. And this is how he's referring to us, out of this highest compassion. He has really a genuine interest in our well-being. And he has really explored the topic of well-being, of peace, of joy, of happiness, and also the causes of suffering and what makes us unhappy, what blocks us, and so forth. He has investigated this in his own experience for many, many lifetimes. And then on the basis of this experience, he has transformed his own ways and has now gained this liberation from samsara and even the complete enlightened state of a Buddha. So all of this is something to understand more and more by studying the teachings. And the more you do that, the more, I mean, I can speak maybe even from my own experience, the more you do that, the more respect you will have for the Buddha. And the more you feel like the Buddha can actually teach me something, he has actually kind of gained realizations or good qualities that are far beyond my present state, and therefore can teach me how to gain this kind of positive states in my own mind, because I can see what he did. I can understand the path that he walked. I can understand that he's presenting a path. I can understand that this path works. And therefore, if somebody presents to me out of compassion a path that I have never thought of and that works, I can understand from this that he's teaching from experience. Yeah, so this is kind of qualities that the Buddha as refuge has. And this is why we go to the Buddha for support. So we might actually, with regard to becoming more loving or compassionate, or in order to deal with our mind and activate our own potential and so forth, we might turn to all kind of different systems. But you might understand that, let's say, systems in psychology or other religions and so forth, by yourself investigating those, you might understand they can get you that far. They have that and that kind of cure, that and that kind of methods. So by comparing that with that what the Buddha has to offer, how the Buddha describes our mind, how the Buddha describes the causes of our suffering, and how the Buddha describes how we can get rid of that and have then a state of mind that is purified and is free to be loving and free to be joyful also, then you can see that the scope of the method that the Buddha has to offer is unrivaled, is going very, very far. So what I'm saying is that this kind of respect or reverence for the Buddha has very much to do with understanding his teachings. This is from where you can get this reference. Another way is to maybe you have a reference for a certain living Lama or Geshe or teacher that is embodying these teachings. And then you can understand that also this teacher is practicing according to the teachings of the Buddha. So this example, let's say, of the Dalai Lama, let's say one is inspired by the Dalai Lama and what the Dalai Lama is doing, and if you reflect on the Dalai Lama, you might even find that he is not just benefiting people, but he's doing this in an extraordinary way, like virtually nobody else does that on the planet right now. And then you can understand that even this living person here is doing that, and by way of practicing according to these teachings of that Buddha Shakyamuni. So this very example that I have here is indicating to me the qualities of the source of the practice of that person, like the Dalai Lama. What the Dalai Lama is practicing is in the end coming from the Buddha Shakyamuni himself. So all the good qualities that we are seeing here, maybe let's say embodied by the Dalai Lama, or if we have our own guru, our own teacher, with regard to our own teacher, all of those are coming out of the practice of the Dharma, applying the Dharma to your own life. And that in the end comes back to the Buddha Shakyamuni who has taught the Dharma. So the expression for the Buddha teaching the Dharma is that he turned the wheel of Dharma. So that's very, very, very interesting, because what this is saying is that the Dharma is actually simply a certain truth about the world and about our mind and about all mind. And so this wheel is always there. The question is just if it is turning or not. What I want to say with this is the Dharma is true all the time. So before the Buddha came, all what the Dharma is saying was already true. The Buddha is just describing the truth. But the Buddha comes and expresses the Dharma. For example, he talked about emptiness, how the final way how things exist, and so forth. Yeah? So that wasn't known in the world, although this was the case. The things did exist in this way, although the world didn't know that. So the Buddha comes and turns this wheel of Dharma. That truth that is already there, the Buddha is expressing it by turning this wheel of Dharma. And so this has, on the one hand, this aspect that the Buddha sets the wheel of the law in motion, But it has also this other connotation that once it has been turned and is in motion, then it's spinning, and it's spinning less and less and less, and finally it stops again. Until in the future there's again another Buddha coming who turns the wheel of Dharma. And then it will spin again, and less and less and less, and it will stop again until there's another Buddha coming. So that's anyway an idea about the Buddha Dharma, that the Buddha Dharma, the Buddha himself expressed that his Dharma will be lost. At one point, there will be no Buddha Dharma anymore on this planet. So again, this is also something where the Buddha is taking his teaching on dependent arising and on impermanence very far. And you wouldn't hear this necessarily in other religions, that they say that whatever revelation they have there will at one point be lost or be gone. So the Buddha describes that the Dharma will degenerate more and more, and finally it will dissolve. There will be just the word Buddha, and then there will be no longer even the word Buddha. It will be just completely gone. So then still everything that he has taught about mind, about the world, about karma, about dependent arising, and so forth, is still true, but it is not known to the world. So the wheel of the Dharma is still there, but it's not turning. Then after a long time, the next Buddha, we know even the name of the next Buddha, Buddha Maitreya, will come and will turn the wheel of Dharma again. So anyway, right now we are in the lucky situation that the wheel of Dharma is still spinning, and we still have an unbroken lineage through this 2,500 years back to the Buddha, back in India. We have living masters today, we have living communities that are practicing and so forth. So we can actually receive this teaching. We can even receive it from inspiring masters, and we can check this teaching. We can ask these masters, so how does this work? I don't understand this, or this doesn't make sense to me. And you can clarify it. You can study the Dharma, you can experiment with the Dharma, you can practice the Dharma and see what it does to you and so forth. And you even have a group of people that are practicing with you. So all the conditions are still completely there. So in other words, there is something that can support us. There are refuge jewels, there are refuge objects present on this planet and in our reach. So there is support, there is refuge in case we have a spiritual goal. So that's what it's depending on. Yeah, if you have a spiritual goal, the Buddha can support you with that. So he will support you twice. He will first of all kind of give teachings describing the present situation, and out of the understanding of that, you might generate the longing for a certain spiritual goal. Yeah, you would like to work with your mind, with yourself in a certain way due to what the Buddha is describing. But that's the one half. But once you have the spiritual goal, then you want to know how to attain that. And this is where you rely on the Buddha Dharma Sangha, especially on the Dharma, on the path, on the practices to actually transform yourself and to work with yourself, to open up and to expand yourself so that you can actually reach this spiritual goal. Let's say, be in charge of your rebirth process, or become completely free of samsara, or even attain complete enlightenment. So that was a lot of talk, which I wanted to do much shorter, because actually I'm supposed to answer 3 questions from your discussion group. So let's look at these questions. Oh, they are here. So I want to start with this one. It says here, how do we know when the time is right for us to engage on a spiritual path? Yeah, this was one of the questions.
Yes, the third one.
The third one, yeah, I mean, I want to ask something about these questions. Are the people who ask these questions present?
Yes.
Yeah? Okay, cool. So they're interested in the answer to that, I guess. So how do we know that we are ready for a spiritual path? I don't know how many people are living in Cluj, but you people in this room have decided today to come to this kind of session. You have a certain interest in Buddhism, you have a certain interest in Buddhist practice and so forth. I'm 100% sure that the vast majority of the people living in Cluj, 99% of those good people, are not in this kind of circle tonight. They do not have this kind of interest. So I would say that to some extent, to enter the spiritual path starts right here, to have an interest in such a spiritual path. If you have an interest in the spiritual path and you therefore want to know more about like how to practice or want to know more actually what's going on inside of you, at least want to know what Buddhism has to say about these topics. I mean, you could even say that this is already part of a spiritual path. Yeah, so a spiritual path is definitely starting by looking for a path, searching for something, yeah, having an interest and so forth. And then, of course, it goes further. Then maybe you would develop a certain kind of conviction with regard to one of the paths that you have encountered. Maybe you would exclude other paths and would say, like, this one makes sense to me, so I want to check this out. And maybe you go to more teachings of that path and you practice some of it and you check what it does to you and so forth. And then maybe conviction is getting stronger and you get stronger and stronger involved in the path. And finally, you're wholeheartedly in that, which comes down to that you take refuge in that path, and then practice stronger and have more results from that. But it all starts somewhere. Yeah, it's not that there is nothing and then all of a sudden, plop, there's a complete spiritual path in your life. So to some extent, you might be on a spiritual path right now. Yeah. So I would say somebody is ready for a spiritual path when that person is really looking for a spiritual path, isn't it? And apart from that, the person would be ready for a specific spiritual path if that person has understood that spiritual path. Really, kind of has an understanding what this path is comprised of, what is actually practiced in this path, and what it is leading to. So, if you have gained a certain conviction that these goals are actually possible, that they are possible to reach by way of these kind of practices, this kind of path, and so forth, then in this way you would engage into a spiritual path. Yeah. And this is something that is growing. Yeah, the same, like in the same way that I was talking about refuge, that actually you would take refuge because you have a spiritual goal and you need support with that, and you go to for refuge to Buddha Dharma Sangha because you think they have great qualities. And I said that both the spiritual goal comes from studying the Dharma, and also understanding the good qualities of Buddha Dharma and Sangha comes from studying the Dharma. So we all start somewhere, and we will not start with the complete knowledge of the Buddha Dharma. This will grow with time. So you take refuge, for example, in an initial state. You have a certain liking for the Buddha. You have a certain liking for what Buddhism is presenting, and you feel home there. Maybe in my case, for example, you felt no longer home in other paths or in other religions or systems or something, and found a new home here. You give it the credit of the doubt, kind of, and then you engage here and you take refuge. And then later on, you understand much more about the Buddha, and you understand much more about the path, and your taking refuge is growing. Yeah, so it's developing, it's getting stronger and stronger. So the same thing with the spiritual path in itself. So you are in a certain state. You're looking for a path. You're interested in path. You try to practice some of the practices that are suggested by the path. So that's the initial step of the path, isn't it? And then by practicing, by knowing more, by getting more experiences, by meeting more people and so forth, then your path develops and gets stronger and so forth. Yeah. So therefore, there is no kind of definitive state of mind or clear sign that you are ready to practice spiritual path. I mean, the point is also from Buddhist point of view, a spiritual path is there in order to improve you, to improve your life, to bring more happiness to your life, to bring more freedom to your life, more peace, and to protect you from all kind of suffering, dissatisfaction, and so forth. Yeah? In this case, it's also there in order to help you with death, with dying, with understanding what's going on in the future, and so forth. Many, many things. So there's benefits coming from a path. So if you want to be benefited by a spiritual path and therefore you want to engage in this practice, I think you're right. You're ready for entering into a spiritual path. Yeah. And this does not exclude that as you explore this path, there's some practice, you come across some practices which you find strange or you find they don't speak to you, and you leave them aside for the time being. And you just practice a certain part of this path. I mean, that's okay. That's okay for the time being. You will develop more further and further, and you do that what you can do, or what is in accordance with you at any one time. Does that make any sense? Is that an answer to the question? Yeah?
Yes.
See some people nodding, so I could take this as a yes. And then there was another question. How can we best evaluate if a person is cured or not, and thus qualified to become a spiritual refuge for others? The second question, right? So that's an interesting question. Because this person that we're talking about could be two different types of person. It could be the Buddha Shakyamuni as the founder of Buddhism, or you could talk about a certain living person. Yeah? So you want to take refuge in a certain living person. So that would touch on the topic of relying on a guru. Yeah, so that's actually rather related topics, but they're treated separately in the Lamrim. So I don't know, is the question more about taking somebody as a guru? Is that the question?
Yes, 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 I think so.
Okay, cool. Let me see what's there. This is quite a topic. I'm willing to say a little bit about it because it's already 18 past 6. I think we are stopping at 6:30, right? Isn't it?
Yes, yes. But
so if people are fine, I talk a little bit about this, but then I have to drop the first question, if that's okay.
we can also stay a bit more if you have time.
Okay. Well, actually, the topic of Guru devotion is so important that even if we stay a bit longer, we're going to talk only about Guru devotion. So, okay. Guru devotion is presented in the Lamrim as the very first topic. And it is presented as being the absolute basis for gaining realizations. It says that one of the benefits of relying on a guru is that if you rely on a guru, there will be realizations. And the meaning is, if you don't rely on a guru, it's very hard to get realizations, up to the point that you could almost say there will be no realizations. Okay. So that's what it says there. From the bottom of my heart, I want to tell you, be very careful with this topic. This is a very difficult topic. It's a very, very advanced practice. Very advanced practice. That the Lamrim is teaching this as the first topic shows that the Lamrim is not a beginner text. It is actually a text that is summarizing all that what you're studying in the great texts that are studied in Ganden Tripumsera in the great Tibetan monasteries. So you have studied the ornament of clear realizations, you have studied the supplement to the middle way, you have studied Vinaya, you have studied the Pramanavartika, you have studied the Abhidharma Kosha, and at the end of that, having heard about Guru devotion in other places, having heard about bodhicitta, about emptiness, about many things, you're now getting a summary by Lama Tsongkhapa about all of this, where this is arranged in stages to meditate. So it is really for people who are advanced. So for example, it says, if you want to get realizations, you will only gain these realizations if you rely on a guru. to want realizations, you really have to understand what the realizations are. You have to understand where you are right now, and you're lacking these realizations. You need to understand that these realizations are even possible and so forth. Yeah? So you would have to gain quite some understanding of the Buddhist universe and all the Buddhist teaching before you even want realizations. If you don't want realizations, then what's the point of relying on a guru when the main benefit is that otherwise you don't get realizations? I think I can safely say that my mother is not interested in realizations. Does she need a guru? She's not interested in realizations. So you have to check for yourself, what do you even understand when the word realization is said, So I would say this is really something for an advanced person. Somebody who's advanced in the practice, that person can rely on a guru. And I want to talk more about this because first of all, we need to understand what Guru devotion is talking about. Guru devotion is talking about that you're going to rely on a living person around you, a human being around you, some master, and you're going to rely on this person such that you will not see any faults in this person ever. That's the practice. The practice is seeing this person as having no faults. You're going to see this person, as it says in the Lamrim, as like you would see the Buddha. Yeah? That's full on. That's really full on. And that would include that when this person gives you Dharma advice, you're going to put this into practice. You're going to follow his advice very, very little, unless it is something that is really going against the Dharma, some strange advice like kill 5 people or something, then you would abstain from this. Otherwise, you would follow the instructions of this guru. Yeah, this is this person will be really, really structuring your life. You want to check if you're on this level. If you're so much urging for high Buddhist realizations that you want to have such a person in your life that is structuring your life, really takes control of your life to some extent. Yeah. Guru devotion is based on that before you practice that, you need to identify somebody as your guru. And now we come to the actual question, how do you find out that somebody is so cured that he can be a refuge? So you could say this is a preliminary. The actual guru devotion practice is seeing the guru as a Buddha, yeah, or like a Buddha, which basically comes down to you're not going to see any faults. If this guru is smoking and drinking a lot, you're going to not see this as a fault. You're going to somehow understand that this makes sense or something. Yeah, so it's really a full-on practice, very, very advanced. So the preliminary to this is that you need to check somebody. Yeah, you have somebody in mind, this person could be my guru. Then the Lama Tsongkhapa makes a long section about how you need to check this guru. If this guru has certain qualities, and these qualities are coming actually from texts coming from Maitreya, coming from the Buddha Shakyamuni and so forth. So there's lists of qualities that the guru has to have in order to be qualified to be somebody else's guru. So that means that you are asked to really check this person that you later on want to rely on by seeing this person like a Buddha and as having no faults. And whatever this person is doing, you will not refer to this as a fault. Yes, again, this is a very strong practice. And you will hand over a lot of freedom is very a lot of your life you will hand over to this person. So because of that, if you don't check, you might end up with somebody who's not qualified. And you can end up with being utterly harmed deep, deep down in your mind if this practice is not going well. And I know people like that. I know people who relied on somebody as a guru who wasn't qualified. They didn't check enough. They had a good feeling when they met this person. They were overwhelmed by the fame or by some kind of feature, but they didn't check enough. And in the end, they were really, really harmed deep in their soul, in their mind. So that's the great danger. So that's why you need to check very, very strongly beforehand. Yeah? You might be lucky. You might choose somebody as your guru out of a good feeling, and you might be lucky that he actually has qualities. But actually, the text itself, the way to practice guru devotion is by first having this preliminary phase where you check. And so there's 10 qualities given, for example. So these qualities you can study from the London text, but you will see that also these qualities are not something that are easily to be understood. Yeah, you also need to study in order to understand what are these qualities. Without understanding what are these qualities, how are you going to check any person if this person has these qualities? Yeah. And so to check somebody to have these qualities, in general, the idea is really like that they talk about that